Hi there, and welcome to The Wrap, simple news updates for busy people, brought to you by Verashni Pillay, myself, Sarah Evans, and the Explain.coza team. In this week's edition, we bring you a special report on the US elections, including our take on why SA's elections look pretty rosy compared to the US and why vote counting in the USA is taking so long. We also take a look at how South Africa isn't actually in the midst of a second COVID-19 wave, and it looks like the DA does see race after all, plus Ethiopia's political crisis briefly explained. Plus, there's our usual updates on Accountability Monitor with South African Airways taking center stage, and we look ahead. Let's dive in. It is said that when the US sneezes, the whole world catches a cold. That's why we're dedicating a large portion of this week's edition to the election all the way over there. At the time of writing, it was not clear yet whether former US Vice President Joe Biden or the incumbent Donald Trump would win. Either way, the results will have an impact on the world that could last for generations, given the impact on climate change and other things. Now, watching the US elections this week has been a useful reminder of how successful our young democracy really is. There are several key differences that keep it that way. First of all, political buy-in. Current US President Donald Trump announced that he was the winner before the votes were even counted, accusing his opponent of trying to steal the election with no evidence. This is foreign to South Africans. Here in SA, our political parties, flawed as they may be, fight fair during elections. In its first election, the EFF was suspicious about some of the results, but it decided to accept the vote count, knowing that messing with the public's trust when it comes to election results is a bridge too far, even for the radical Red Berets. If only the US incumbent understood the same. Second of all, the appointment of judges. Trump has also said he will contest the results of votes in some states and possibly the whole election at the US Supreme Court, but the partiality of that court is in question. Just before the election, Trump rushed to appoint a conservative judge in the form of Amy Coney Barrett, swaying the court's overall political sentiment to the conservatives. The US court system is notoriously political because judges are appointed by politicians, but here in SA, our judges are appointed through a mostly impartial process that involves legal minds, civil society, and parliament. Barrett's appointment would likely work in Trump and the Republican Party's favor should the US election end up in court. To make matters worse, 3 justices of that court were previously part of former President George W. Bush's legal team and helped successfully challenge the outcome of the country's 2000 elections in court. Thirdly, impartial and strong institutions. Here in SA, our courts are, for the most part, apolitical. Our constitutional court, the equivalent of the US Supreme Court, is a world-class institution that has never been afraid to hold the government and former presidents to account. Our internationally recognized Independent Electoral Commission, which runs our elections, has consistently remained above the fray and delivered free and fair elections. And so it was all the more galling this week when US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo expressed concern over reports of violence and vote rigging taking place in Tanzania, another country that's just held elections. Yes, the Tanzanian situation is serious, but perhaps Pompeo should look around his glass house and put his stones back in his pocket. Everything we're seeing raises questions about double standards. If the situation in the US right now was unfolding in SA, many people would no doubt be calling for the United Nations to intervene. But thanks to the safeguards put in place by the drafters of our Constitution, our elections are peaceful, free, and fair. Long may it stay that way. Now, you might be wondering why vote counting in the US is taking so long, because as you're reading this, votes are still being counted. Now, under normal circumstances, the election winner is declared late on election night, which would have been on Tuesday. But this year, record numbers voted early or via the post, thanks in large part to COVID-19. Those votes take a while to process. Additional verifications plus different rules all add up to a long delay. It's not great considering the political tensions already at play. Now, what's a swing state and why is everyone watching them? First, a quick explainer. Swing states have gone back and forth between supporting Democrat or Republican candidates over the years. They also typically hold huge sway with the so-called Electoral College, which is a very controversial system in the US that sees a number of electors from each state ultimately vote for the US president. The problem is these electors aren't chosen in proportion to the country's actual population. For example, citizens of Wyoming have 3.18 times as much clout in the Electoral College than an average American. In addition to being politically sensitive, then, swing states have more influence over who is finally chosen as the US president. So, where are they at? Well, at first, Trump seemed to dominate most of the 12 swing states. But at the time of writing, 4 of these were firmly in Trump's favor, and 4 favored his opponent, Joe Biden. It's nail-bitingly close. In case you're wondering, Kanye didn't make it. Now, rapper Kanye West also ran for the US presidential elections, and as laughable as the whole thing was, he still managed to bag 60,000 voters after running in just 12 of the country's 50 states and making 1 campaign appearance, all while clearly emotionally unstable. Amazing, but also worrying in terms of potentially splitting the vote in such a tight election race. Consider that George W. Bush once beat Al Gore by just 537 decisive votes in Florida. Now, Ye has conceded defeat, but hinted he'll try again in 2024. Given his recent birthday gift to his wife Kim Kardashian, perhaps we all need to brace ourselves for campaign holograms. Now, is South Africa really headed for a second COVID-19 wave? Probably not. One analyst, Ridwan Suleiman, a senior researcher at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, says test positivity rates have remained steady for the past 2 months and are still trending downwards. But that does not mean we're out of the woods. Suleiman stresses that COVID-19 is still here. The number of confirmed cases hasn't really decreased, but has leveled off. And it's a reminder that there's still so much we don't know about the virus, and that taking precautions, for example, wear your mask, wash your hands, and maintain social distance, is still essential. Now, we're fortunate. Serious second waves are wreaking havoc elsewhere in the world. England, France, and Germany are currently under their second lockdowns. Savor your current freedom, and let's keep pulling together to maintain it for a long time to come. Remember when Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed received the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize to rapturous applause? No? Well, it was a pretty big deal, and for a while everyone was enamored with a 44-year-old reformer who ended a governing coalition that monopolized power in Ethiopia for 27 years and brokered a landmark peace deal with neighboring Eritrea. But the country is now on the brink of a civil war. Abiy has effectively declared war on the party that was at the head of that long-time government, the TPLF, and the northern Tigray region where it governs. To put that into perspective, this would be a little like the ANC declaring war on the DA in the Western Cape and sending in troops. It's frightening. Now, tension has been rising between the two parties for ages, and with internet shutdowns and increasing intolerance for independent media, it's difficult to know who is in the right in this situation. The only thing that is for sure is that the brief golden moment of optimism that met Abiy's appointment has given way to dismay. This is all important because, as the Financial Times puts it, Ethiopia is one of Africa's most promising economic development stories. And we'd just like to quote this piece from the Financial Times. Despite its association with famine in the 1980s, Ethiopia has become a source of hope in the continent. Under the previous coalition government, which ran the country for 27 years until 2018, the economy grew at nearly 10% a year for roughly 2 decades. Although Ethiopia is still poor, those growth years transformed its prospects, improving infrastructure as well as health and education levels, and holding out the possibility of the country achieving middle income status. Closer to home, it seems as though the DA has put its race cards on the table. Now, fresh from its electoral conference last weekend, the DA seems intent on taking back the conservative white voters it lost to the Freedom Front Plus in the last election. It has launched a campaign to put Afrikaans on an equal footing with English as a language medium at Stellenbosch University. In 2016, the university removed Afrikaans as a medium of language, for teaching in an effort not to marginalize many black students who are not fluent in the language. The Constitutional Court has since upheld the 2016 policy. But the DA says Afrikaans is being excluded for political reasons. It has also made farm murders, quote, a focus, saying these should be prioritized in the courts and be declared a hate crime specifically when the crime targets people who identify as farmers. Both these policy choices have raised questions about the DA's priorities at a time when the party has emerged from its conference claiming not to see race as the main reason behind redress in the country. But both these policies do appear to appeal to the priorities of mainly white Afrikaans people. As columnist Chris Roper writes in this week's Financial Mail, it appears as though the DA does see race after all. So, could there be life on another planet, and what is it trying to tell the US? On the day of the US election, scientists recorded a short, intense burst of radio waves coming from inside our Milky Way. As scientists pondered the origins of the waves, closer to home, humans wondered whether an alien civilization was trying to nuke Earth in an intergalactic attempt at loud diplomacy. Coincidentally, Trump was ahead of the polls at the time. But scientists later discovered that the blast was probably from a neutron star, and the discovery will help the scientific community better understand these kinds of galactic events in the future. In our accountability monitor this week, we told you last week why our dear airline is the country's drunk uncle. Well, the people who supplied the metaphorical bottles of booze aren't getting away with it. This week saw two former top dogs take the stand at the Zondo Commission. But one of the people accused of running the airline into the tarmac, Dudu Myeni, chose not to answer questions when given the opportunity to clear her name. Myeni is involved in another case. She's appealing a decision by the courts to declare her a delinquent director after her dodgy leadership at the SAA board. Because of this, Myeni said she wanted to invoke her right not to incriminate herself. However, some experts say she's not actually allowed to do this because the two cases aren't related. Her evidence is key to understanding why the state-owned airline is in dire straits. She was, however, very vocal on all the wrong things. On Thursday, Myeni bizarrely revealed the name of an anonymous witness who blew the whistle on Myeni's alleged involvement in shady tender dealings before her time at SAA. The Commission has previously said the witness's identity had to be protected. This is a grave offence given the importance of whistleblowers in our system. Zondo was shocked and tried to stop her, and now Myeni may face consequences for this breach. Meanwhile, former South African Airways Technical Board Chairperson Yake Kwinana turned to food at the Commission this week to explain why she had allegedly meddled in the awarding of tenders at the airline to her benefit. She said the following: "If my daughter sells fat cakes and someone next door is also selling fat cakes, why would I buy next door instead of supporting my daughter?" Now, that's an explanation that makes perfect sense in the context of Magwinya, but is frankly baffling when you're talking about spending the national budget to help out your friends. Kwinana is also objectively wrong. Everyone knows the best Magwinyas are not her daughters, but can be purchased from the OC at the corner of Kingsway and Fawley in Joburg. Now, if you've understandably lost track of events at Zondo after the last few months, catch up with the year's developments in our Keeping Up with the Commission's piece at explain.coza, and you can keep up with all the latest in the fight against corruption with our accountability monitor at explain.coza. On to football news. Our national football team, the one we should be paying attention to anyway, Banyana Banyana, is off to an amazing start to the COSAFA Cup. The team beat Angola 2-0 on Tuesday in the opening game of the COSAFA Women's Championship. Banyana Banyana has won the title 6 times before, including last year. The win over Angola was made even more impressive by the fact that the women haven't been able to play all year due to COVID-19. And now, looking ahead. President Cyril Ramaphosa is calling us into a family meeting next week. Get ready for a scolding. According to a statement, his cabinet is concerned that some people are behaving recklessly and irresponsibly as if COVID-19 no longer exists. We're looking at you, Tin Roof. But don't panic. Last week, Ramaphosa dismissed claims of a return to lockdown level 3. This week, matric started writing exams after the lockdown contributed to making this one of the most difficult academic years on record. Expect to hear a lot of news related to this as Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga monitors various exams. Later this month, Public Protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane and Ramaphosa will be back in court for the final stage of their fight over the president's 2017 campaign financing. Mkhwebane is challenging a High Court judgment that set aside her report into Ramaphosa's 2017 ANC presidential campaign funding, where she found that Ramaphosa had lied to Parliament about receiving certain donations. Now, if the Constitutional Court rules in Mkhwebane's favour now, it will mean that her reasoning, that Ramaphosa lied to Parliament and the nation about who funded his campaign, will stand. Ramaphosa says that is simply not true. And that's it from us at The Wrap, a product of Explain.coza, simple news summaries for busy people. Remember to share the love, tell your friends to sign up for the updates at explain.coza/subscribe. Till next time, goodbye from Verashni, Tash, and myself, Sarah.